Grandpa Aang and his friends were around our age when they traveled the world.
Well, at least I won't have to worry about you starving out there.
Sweet buns with happy faces on them? This one is smudged. I can't eat this.
Hello everyone, welcome back to Woo Can Cook. My name is Wesley and this is a show where we are slowly cooking our way through all of the food from my childhood. Today we're diving into part 2 of our Legend of Korra series and taking a look at the sweet custard buns from season 4. And yes, if you are wondering, I did forget the happy faces on our buns and I am very sorry about this. I promise it will be okay. For those keeping track, we also did the sticky rice cakes or Zhongzi from Legend of Korra a few months ago, which is also worth checking out. After doing a little bit of research, I also discovered that our dough here is actually a multi-purpose dough that's used for a bunch of different pastries that I grew up eating, including things like chashu bao, cocktail buns, and a few others. So we'll be diving headfirst into the Chinese pastry world and checking some of those out as well. So let's get into it. Starting off with my sweet bun dough, I'm measuring out 1 cup of whole milk here that I'm heating up to lukewarm temperature. Make sure that your milk isn't too hot or else you could kill the cultures in your dry active yeast. Then I'm adding half a cup of sugar followed by our dry active yeast. Then I'm mixing all of this together until combined and letting it proof for 10 full minutes. During this time, your yeast should activate and start eating the warm milk and sugar that we've mixed together, causing some bubbles to form. If you don't see bubbles, it's possible that your yeast is dead, womp, so you may need to start over and go to the store for some fresh yeast. Once we're sure that our yeast isn't dead, I'm adding 2 eggs to our mixing bowl, followed by 2 tablespoons of sesame oil and a pinch of kosher salt. Okay, so we're readjusting our camera here and breaking out our stand mixer for the job. I'm affixing my dough hook attachment, starting my mixer off on its lowest setting, and gradually adding a total of 4 cups of AP flour while also gradually increasing the mixer's speed. You'll want to be careful about adding your flour gradually or else this can happen, and you're gonna have a fun mess to clean up. This dough is pretty dense too, so your stand mixer is definitely going to be working hard to knead everything together. Give your stand mixer some emotional support, thank it for our wonderful gluten development, and once we start seeing our dough pull away from the sides of the bowl like this, we're about done. Back over on my cutting board, I'm liberally oiling the sides of a large bowl. Then I'm adding my dough to the bowl, covering it with plastic and setting this aside to proof at room temperature for 2 to 3 hours. If room temperature is particularly cold where you are, like it is for me, a great trick that I've discovered is proofing your dough in the oven with the oven light on. This should create a nice balmy 78-degree proofing temperature for your yeast cultures to thrive. 2 to 3 hours later, we're removing our dough from the oven and discovering a wonderfully airy dough. Then we're punching the air out of this dough and working it into a ring shape. Then I'm dividing my dough into 12 equal pieces by cutting it in half, then into quarters, then cutting each quarter into 3 equal pieces. Don't just keep cutting them in half or else you'll end up with 16 pieces, Wesley. Math is hard, I know. Next, we're setting our dough aside for a moment and getting to work on our custard filling. I'm whisking up 2 eggs here with no broken shells, then measuring out 111 grams or just say 1/3 cups condensed milk, and gradually whisking this all together with our eggs. Next, I'm gradually sifting in 3 tablespoons each of flour and dried milk powder. Add a towel to your board if your mixing bowl is traveling on its own, and once we have a thick mixture formed, we're heading to our stove. Over on the stove, I'm adding our custard to a small saucepan on very low heat. Remember that your custard is mostly egg, so those eggs can scramble very easily if your fire is too hot. Then I'm gradually adding 3 tablespoons of melted butter. Switch to your whisk if you notice clumps forming, and once everything is combined to a thick custard, we're popping this in the fridge for 30 minutes until it solidifies. 30 minutes later, you'll be greeted by a very solid custard, which will be much easier to work with than our liquid form. Getting back to my dough, I'm rolling these out to about 6 inches in diameter and rotating a quarter turn after each roll. Then I'm adding a tablespoon of custard to the center and folding my buns shut with pleats. Then I'm tearing off the tops of my fold, flipping the whole thing over and tucking everything in until a smooth ball forms. We're repeating this 12 times, then covering our buns in plastic and putting them back into our oven with the light on for a final proof for 30 minutes. Then we're brushing these down with an egg wash, topping with our sesame seeds, and baking them at 350 degrees F for 20 to 30 minutes until golden brown. Upon completing this recipe, I discovered that my custard only yielded enough for about 6 buns, which is why you may notice that half of my buns are not filled with anything. I went ahead and doubled the written recipe in the description here to correct this, so if you do take a shot at this one, be sure to double your custard quantity. Otherwise, these sweet buns were super delicious and are perfect for a quick breakfast or snack. All things considered, they don't actually have too much sugar in them, so they work as a wonderfully subtle meal that's not as sugary as a standard donut. All of this said though, these custard buns definitely left me very nostalgic for my personal favorite Chinese pastry, which is the cocktail bun. I remember as a kid that I always much preferred these over custard buns because they were a lot more sugary and sweet. Since they are made from the same dough, I thought I'd take a shot at these as well and explore some of my childhood nostalgia with you all. Okay, so for our cocktail buns, we're using literally the exact same dough recipe, so we're just gonna speed right through all of this and jump straight to our filling. That said, however, unlike custard buns, cocktail buns have 3 separate sugary elements, which is our filling, our topping, and our simple syrup coating, so we'll get to all 3 of these in order. For our filling, I'm starting off with my dry ingredients and mixing up half a cup each of white sugar, AP flour, and milk powder, followed by a full cup of desiccated coconut. Then in a separate bowl, I'm mixing up my wet ingredients, starting with 4 tablespoons of melted butter, followed by 1 egg. Then I'm combining all of these together and mixing everything until a pebbly paste forms. This stuff is super delicious but does yield exactly enough for 12 buns, so resist the temptation to just start eating this filling right now. Next, I'm moving on to my topping, which is my favorite part of these buns because it's basically just sugar. We're melting another 3 tablespoons of butter and mixing in 2 tablespoons of sugar and 4 tablespoons of flour until a solid paste forms. Then I'm putting all of this into a pastry bag, or if you don't have pastry bags, a plain old Ziploc bag with a corner cut off will also work too. Finally, for our simple syrup coating, I'm keeping it pretty basic here and just mixing equal parts white sugar and hot water, then stirring everything until it's dissolved. For our dough, we're starting these off pretty similar to our custard buns and rolling these out to 6 inches in diameter, rotating a quarter turn after each roll. Then I'm adding an even layer of my coconut filling to our flattened dough and rolling the whole thing up like a mat. Once we have a log formed, I'm tucking the ends in to make sure nothing spills out and making a quick adjustment because these are looking a little phallic, and repeating all of this 12 times. If you find that your buns are not quite staying shut, add a little bit of water before pressing it shut and that should help it stay in place. You do want to make sure that these don't pop open or else this can happen. Then I'm whisking up an egg for my egg wash, but wait, first we're covering these in plastic and setting them aside for a final 30-minute proof. Then I'm brushing everything down with our egg wash, piping in our topping in strips, finishing with some sesame seeds and baking at 350 degrees F for 20 to 25 minutes until golden brown. We're finishing these off by brushing them down with our simple syrup and letting them rest for 15 minutes before digging in. These things are super delicious and absolutely one of my favorite Chinatown desserts. It just sort of brings me right back to 3 p.m. on a Tuesday after school and my dad shows up with one of those pink Chinatown pastry boxes filled with awesome snacks that I'm not allowed to open until after dinner. Look who's laughing now though, I just made these at 7 p.m. on a Saturday and fully ate 2 of them for dinner. Adulting. Okay, so that's it everyone. I hope you found this informative or at the very least entertaining, and I hope you give one or both of these recipes a try. Both of these are absolutely a big part of my childhood growing up, and I'm super glad I spotted them in The Legend of Korra and had an excuse to make them. Stick around and subscribe. I've got a bunch of other cool, fun copycat recipes coming up soon, as well as some more Avatar and Legend of Korra stuff in the works too. As always, like, comment, subscribe, and happy baking. I'll see you soon.